Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, a wonderful day to talk about all the beautiful poetry that exists in the world. And today I wanted to talk about some interesting poetry that I found from an Indian writer. It's about women and seeking justice, which aren't all that strange, but sometimes this channel is more focused on the around the world than just the weird itself. And so the poem that I'm referring to is Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods by Tishani Doshi. For those who don't know, Tishani Doshi is an Indian writer and journalist, which are probably the same thing, but she's mostly known for writing poetry. She attended Johns Hopkins University out on the East Coast of the United States, and she has been writing for about 15 or so years, with her most recently published book having come out either last year or the year before. So a pretty interesting writer. I do like her style of poetry. It's very out there and very loud and necessary, especially the poem that I'm going to be talking about today. So without further ado, let's talk about this poem. I will read it, do a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. Girls are coming out of the woods. Girls are coming out of the woods, wrapped in cloaks and hoods, carrying iron bars and candles and a multitude of scars, collected on acres of premature grass in city buses, in temples and bars. Girls are coming out of the woods with panties tied around their lips, making such a noise, it's impossible to hear. Is the world speaking too? Is it really asking? What does it mean to give someone a proper resting? Girls are coming out of the woods, lifting their broken legs high, leaking secrets from unfastened thighs, all the lies whispered by strangers in swimming coaches and uncles, especially uncles, who said spreading would be light and easy, who put bullets in their chest and fed their pretty faces to fire, who sucked the mud clean off their ribs and decorated their coffins with briar. Girls are coming out of the woods, clearing the ground to scatter their stories. Even those girls found naked in ditches and wells, those forgotten in neglected attics and buried in riverbeds like sediments from a different century, they crawled their way out from behind curtains of childhood. The silver-pink weight of their bodies pushing against water, against the sad, feathered tarnish of remembrance. Girls are coming out of the woods the way birds arrive at morning windows, pecking and humming until all you can hear is the smash of their minuscule hearts against glass, the bright desperation of sound, bashing, disappearing. Girls are coming out of the woods. They're coming. They're coming. And so that was Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods by Tishani Doshi. In terms of analysis, I would say this is a pretty easy poem to understand. It's not so complex in its meaning as it is the ultimate message of what she's trying to send across. And that is that girls are coming for justice. Girls are coming for vengeance. Not only those girls who are still alive, but those girls that are dead, they are demanding that their voices be heard from beyond the grave. And I think what Tishani Doshi is calling attention to sexual assault, rape, murder, general abuse towards women that has been present throughout all of history. And I think this is a poem that could have been published, in any decade. And it would feel like it belongs there, sadly, because of how American society, how society at large views women as expendable, as worthy of subjugation, as not worthy of positions of power or anything like that. And so, it could belong in any decade, but it's very interesting to see the context in which she's published this, because this was published in in a book from 2017, and if that date or that year sounds at all familiar to you, you might recognize that as the approximate start time of the Me Too movement. That's when around the time Harvey Weinstein was called out by all the women who he had sexually abused. Around the time Bill Cosby was getting accused of sexual misconduct. Around that time, like so many people in Hollywood and outside of Hollywood were being called out for their many crimes against women. And so this poem really feels like it's punctuating that moment. Girls are coming out of the woods. They're no longer trying to be silent about the abuses that they've faced. And it's not just women who are famous, women all around, athletes, women in the workplace, and women in tech, women everywhere. They're trying to call attention to the stuff that's been happening and gone unnoticed or unpunished for years. One thing that I can think of recently that happened is with Activision Blizzard, how the women at those companies called out how HR and the company at large ignored women who were like calling out these abuses by male staff members. I believe one thing that happened was that a woman's breast milk was being stolen out of the fridge, which is very extreme, and that should not happen in a workplace. And women have called that out and said this is a problem. So much so that Xbox, you think, stepped in and like they're like, we don't want to continue our relationship with you if this is going to be a problem. You need changes, and so hopefully changes have been made. But this also applies to the system at large, where some progress has been made, but ultimately we're still at a slow prodding pace. Like, women aren't in a better state than they were 5 years ago. Just because the president has changed, that doesn't necessarily make everything even better. And even this current president, Joe Biden, has had accusations of sexual assault lobbied against him. And so I really like that aspect of the poem, and especially near the end, where she's talking about women like crawling from their graves and their neglected attics and their riverbeds, women who have been murdered and like sort of like buried in the past, where like no one could identify who killed them. Like, they're refusing to be silent. Like, I think with the advance of technology and like DNA sequencing and all that, it's becoming easier to solve those crimes, whereas before it wasn't easily solvable. And I think of like the Golden State Killer, I think it was, who recently, like, thanks to advances in technology, we were able to identify who that was. And so a person who had killed a lot of women was brought down. And so those women, like, they didn't receive a lot of justice because they're dead, but they did receive some justice years later. And I think all of that is what Tishani Doshi is getting at in that moment. The idea that women are coming out of the woods and they are not being silent about what is wrong. And they're pushing for progress as much as possible, and even more than what is possible, because this should not be happening to anyone. And if there's one thing I especially love about this poem, is that repeated statement: girls are coming out of the woods. You cannot ignore this. This is happening. And I think that's a pretty strong statement that continues to this day in the Me Too movement, but as well as women's equality movements. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods by Tishani Doshi. A pretty good poem. One that really stuck out to me, just because the more I read it, the more I felt the power of what she's trying to say, and I'm sure other people have said similar things, but no poems from that time period have stood out like Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods. I do recommend that you go out and read it, so I'm going to put a link to it in the description. Hopefully you read it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, or just tell me what you think of my review here. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this poem and this person and Poetry Thursday in general, because more people should be doing it on BookTube. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and woodsy travels. Farewell.